Somewhere tonight, 100 million people will scream at a television screen. And somewhere in that same room, on that same couch, sitting right next to them, will be someone who feels absolutely nothing. Not pretending. Not performing boredom for attention. Nothing. No adrenaline. No tribal thrill. No spike in the chest when the crowd roars. Just a quiet, private stillness in the middle of a storm everyone else is drowning in. And here's the question almost nobody asks. What if that stillness isn't a flaw? What if it's not social failure or emotional deficiency or something wrong with them? What if the people who don't feel the pull of the crowd are running on a completely different psychological operating system? One with its own logic, its own protection, its own quiet strength. By the end of this, you're going to understand something about yourself or someone you love that will change the way you see every family gathering, every office celebration, every moment where you're expected to feel what everyone else feels. And don't. Because the truth about emotional indifference goes so much deeper than "I just don't like that." And once you see the mechanism underneath it, you will never look at the quiet ones in the room the same way again. Let's begin. The myth of the default human. Here is something almost nobody questions. We assume enthusiasm is the baseline. We assume that caring loudly and visibly is the normal setting a human being is supposed to run on. And anything less than that gets treated like a malfunction. But that assumption is wrong. Caring intensely about a shared cultural moment is not hardwired. It is not automatic. It is built slowly out of something far more specific than most people realize. Psychologists call it reflected glory. It's the phenomenon where your brain rewards you. Actual dopamine, actual pleasure chemistry. For the success of a group you merely belong to. You didn't throw the pass. You didn't close the deal. You didn't win the award. You simply existed in proximity to the win, and your nervous system throws you a party anyway. Think about the last time your company hit a quarterly goal you had almost nothing to do with, and still, everyone clapped, and you felt that little glow. Think about the last time your neighborhood team won something and strangers hugged each other in the street. That glow is real. It is chemical. It is not fake enthusiasm. It is borrowed triumph, and the brain treats borrowed triumph like the real thing. But here's what almost nobody says out loud. Not every nervous system responds to that mechanism the same way. For some people, reflected glory lights up like a fireworks show. For others, that exact same trigger pulls the string and nothing ignites. The fuse is wet, not broken, just wet. There was a study out of the Journal of Consumer Psychology that mapped something researchers call optimal stimulation level. It turns out human beings have wildly different thresholds for how much emotional intensity feels good versus how much feels like an assault. Some brains are wired to crave the spike, the noise, the chaos, the unpredictability, the crowd. Other brains experience that same spike as something closer to static. Overload. Static that drowns out anything meaningful underneath it. Neither wiring is superior, but one of them gets celebrated in public and the other gets quietly pathologized in private. And that imbalance is where so much unnecessary shame begins. Because when someone doesn't light up during the big shared moment, the wedding toast everyone's crying at, the office party everyone's screaming through, the family reunion everyone's hugging their way through, the group doesn't usually think, interesting, different nervous system. The group thinks, what's wrong with them? And that verdict gets internalized, quietly, painfully, over years. But there is a second layer underneath the wiring itself, a psychological force even more ancient than dopamine. And once you understand it, you'll realize the stakes of not caring were never really about the game, or the party, or the moment at all. The tribe that never left. Human beings did not survive the last 100,000 years because we were strong individually. We survived because we banded together, and we punished anyone who didn't band together with us. That ancient survival code never left. It just changed clothes. It used to mean life or death. Exile from the tribe meant exposure, starvation, predators. Now it shows up in smaller, quieter, but eerily similar forms. The group chat that goes silent when you say you're skipping the reunion. The raised eyebrow at the office party when you leave early. The unspoken but very real social cost of saying out loud, I don't feel what you feel. This is why sports fandom, holiday traditions, and cultural spectacles work so powerfully on the group level. They are modern stand-ins for tribal bonding rituals. When your team wins, the ancient brain doesn't register entertainment. It registers, my group defeated their group, and I belong to the winning side. That is primal. That is old. That long predates stadiums and scoreboards. And this is exactly why indifference to those rituals gets treated as something closer to betrayal than preference. When you say, I don't care about the big game, or I don't really do the holiday performance, some people don't hear a personal taste. They hear a rejection of the tribe itself. A quiet accusation that the thing holding them together might not be as universal, as sacred, as necessary as they need it to be. That's why the reaction is so often disproportionate. A simple, calm, it's just not my thing, can trigger something close to defensiveness, even hurt in the person hearing it. Because on some unconscious level, they're not just defending a football game or a holiday tradition, they're defending the emotional infrastructure that makes them feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves. And here's the quiet twist almost nobody talks about. The people who don't feel that pull toward the mainstream tribal ritual are not, in fact, incapable of belonging. They are often deeply connected, just somewhere else. A small group of 3 friends who talk about grief without flinching. An online forum of strangers who understand a specific hobby down to its smallest detail. A single, sacred friendship that runs deeper than any stadium crowd ever could. They didn't reject community. They simply found a version of it that doesn't require performance to prove it's real. But there's a third mechanism sitting underneath both of these. One that explains why some people don't just feel indifferent to the big shared moment, but actually feel something closer to discomfort. And that mechanism has almost nothing to do with the moment itself. It has to do with control. The quiet power of locus of control. There's a concept in psychology called locus of control. And once you understand it, you will start seeing it everywhere. In the boardroom, in the family kitchen, in the quiet corner of every party. Locus of control describes where a person believes their outcomes come from. People with an external locus of control tend to be comfortable investing emotional energy into things they cannot influence. The weather, the stock market, the outcome of a game they're watching from a couch 3,000 miles from the stadium. The feeling itself is the reward. The ride is the point, regardless of the destination. People with an internal locus of control operate very differently. Their nervous system is wired to ask, almost instinctively, what is my energy actually accomplishing here? Watching a screen, yelling at players who cannot hear them, hoping a coin flip of a play goes their way. For this kind of person, that entire exchange can feel, on some subconscious level, hollow. Not because they're incapable of joy, but because their particular brand of joy is built on agency, on effort producing outcome, on their hands actually shaping the result. Think about the person at work who quietly can't get invested in office politics, gossip, or drama they have no power to change, but who will throw themselves completely, obsessively, joyfully into a project where their effort visibly moves the needle. That's not coldness. That's a nervous system that has learned, somewhere along the way, that emotional investment without control is a losing trade. And this shows up far beyond sports. It shows up in people who cannot get emotionally invested in celebrity gossip, but will read 4 books in a weekend about a subject they're trying to master. It shows up in people who feel numb during the manufactured suspense of a reality show finale, but feel electric while solving a problem at their own kitchen table. It shows up in people who sit stone-faced through the dramatic countdown of a competition they have no stake in, and then come alive the moment the conversation turns to something they can actually build, fix, or change. This is not apathy. This is precision. Their emotional currency is limited, and they spend it only where it produces something real. But locus of control explains the why behind the disengagement. It does not explain something else, something far more physical, far more biological, that turns I don't care into something closer to I actually cannot handle this. And for 1 in 5 people walking around you right now, that difference is not a metaphor. It is neurological reality. When the world turns up the volume too loud. Psychologists have a name for a trait carried by roughly 20% of the population. Highly sensitive, not fragile, not weak. Highly sensitive, in the clinical sense, means a nervous system that processes sensory and emotional information more deeply, more thoroughly, and with far less filtering than the average brain. For a highly sensitive person, a loud party is not simply not their thing. It is an actual sensory event. The overlapping conversations, the competing screens, the unpredictable noise spikes. The emotional temperature of a room full of excited, unpredictable people. All of it gets processed at a depth most people never have to think about, because most people's brains automatically filter 90% of it out before it ever reaches conscious awareness. The highly sensitive brain does not filter it out. It lets almost all of it in. And by the end of 3 hours in that environment, something has happened that looks, from the outside, exactly like disinterest, but feels, from the inside, exactly like depletion. A private, invisible exhaustion that has nothing to do with the actual content of the event and everything to do with how much raw sensory and emotional data that particular nervous system just processed. This is why some people leave a family gathering or a work celebration or a crowded viewing party and need an entire day of silence to recover. Not because they didn't enjoy the people, because their nervous system did 3 times the processing work everyone else's did without anyone noticing. Now layer something else on top of this. Modern life, even before the party starts, is already a nonstop sensory and emotional assault. Notifications, deadlines, group chats, news cycles, financial stress, comparison culture. The average nervous system is already running close to capacity before a single cultural spectacle even begins. For a highly sensitive person, or simply for someone already emotionally maxed out, one more mandatory, high-stimulation event doesn't feel like a treat. It feels like being asked to run 1 more mile after you've already run the marathon. This is why the quiet ones sometimes seem detached, distracted, or disengaged during the big moment. They are not failing to care. They are triaging, protecting the last reserves of a battery that's already dangerously close to empty. But there is one more piece to this puzzle. One that explains why, even for people who are not highly sensitive, even for people with plenty of emotional bandwidth left, some shared cultural moments still feel less like joy and more like something to survive. And it has everything to do with how the brain handles the thing it fears most: uncertainty. The uncertainty nobody talks about. Every high-stakes shared moment, the championship game, the dramatic reveal, the countdown, the cliffhanger, runs on the same fuel. Unpredictability. Nobody knows what happens next, and that not knowing is supposed to be the thrill. But research on uncertainty tolerance shows something quietly profound. People vary dramatically in how their nervous system interprets not knowing. For some, unpredictability reads as excitement, possibility, the delicious ache of anything could happen. For others, that exact same not knowing reads as threat, danger. A body on high alert, bracing for an outcome it cannot control and cannot predict. This is the same underlying mechanism behind why some people devour horror movies for fun and others physically cannot sit through one. It is not about strength or weakness. It is about how differently the nervous system interprets the exact same stimulus. One person's thrill is another person's genuine physiological stress response. Now combine that with something we already uncovered, the fact that, for many people, the outcome of the big moment has zero real impact on their actual life. No matter who wins, their mortgage is the same tomorrow. Their relationships are the same tomorrow. Their responsibilities are the same tomorrow. For someone with lower uncertainty tolerance, sitting through hours of manufactured tension for an outcome that changes nothing starts to feel less like entertainment and much more like voluntary, unnecessary anxiety. Why would a nervous system already working overtime choose to add stress on purpose for a result that carries no real consequence? This single insight reframes something so many people have spent years quietly ashamed of. that restless, hollow feeling during the big group countdown, the one they've never told anyone about because it felt like they were the only one broken enough to feel it. It isn't brokenness. It is a nervous system correctly identifying an experience as stressful rather than exciting and trying, in its own quiet way, to protect them from it. But even understanding all of this, the tribal wiring, the locus of control, the sensory depth, the uncertainty threshold, there is still one more layer left. The layer that explains why, even once someone understands their own indifference perfectly, the loneliest part isn't the indifference itself. It's what happens next, in the room, surrounded by people who don't understand it. The loneliest room in the house. Here is the part almost nobody says out loud because it's uncomfortable and because it sounds smaller than it actually is. It is not just boring to sit through a moment everyone else is thrilled by. It is lonely. Picture the room. The countdown is happening. Everyone around you is leaning forward, gasping, laughing, hugging strangers over something that, to you, means nothing. You are not faking outrage or faking joy, because faking it would feel like a small betrayal of yourself. So instead, you sit there, quietly present, quietly separate, watching everyone else disappear into a shared emotional current you were never pulled into. And in that moment, something quietly painful happens. You start to wonder if the disconnect is about the game, or the party, or the tradition at all, or if it's about you, whether you missed some invisible memo everyone else received. Whether there's something fundamentally different about the way you're built, something that makes belonging just slightly harder to access than it seems to be for everyone else in the room. This is the real wound underneath, I don't care about that. It was never really about caring. It was about the fear that not caring means you don't belong. That the parts of you that don't light up on command are somehow proof that you're on the outside of something everyone else gets to be inside of. But here is the reframe that changes everything. Belonging was never supposed to require identical wiring. It was never supposed to mean feeling exactly what the room feels, exactly when the room feels it, at the volume the room demands. Real belonging survives difference. It has to. Because if connection only works when everyone feels the same thing at the same time, then almost nobody actually belongs anywhere. Because almost nobody is wired exactly like the person next to them. The people who don't feel the pull of the big shared moment are not defective participants in human connection. They are simply proof that human connection was never meant to be one size fits all in the first place. Some people bond over stadiums. Others bond over quiet, late-night conversations that last 4 hours and cover everything that actually matters. Some people find their tribe in 80,000-seat arenas. Others find it in a single friend who understands their silence without needing it explained. Neither version is more real. Neither version is more valid. They are simply different frequencies tuned to different signals, and both of them are still, unmistakably, human. So if you have ever sat in that room, quietly detached while everyone around you disappeared into the moment, here is what you need to hear. There was nothing wrong with you. Your nervous system was not malfunctioning. It was protecting you, filtering for you, or simply telling you the truth about what actually moves you, even when that truth didn't match the room. And if you are someone who does feel the pull, who does light up with the crowd, who does find genuine joy in the shared spectacle, that is equally real, equally valid, and equally worth honoring. Because in the end, the measure of a person was never how loudly they could match the room. It was whether they had the quiet courage to stay honest inside it, even when honesty meant standing gently, peacefully, apart from everyone else. If this made you see someone in your life differently, or made you see yourself differently, there's another video waiting that goes even deeper into why some people feel everything at once, while the world around them insists they should feel nothing at all.